Thank you for being here with us on SNC tonight. It's my pleasure to welcome in our next guest. We have Norman Woods, Executive Director of Family Voice. Norman, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me on today.
I hate the subject, but I'm glad to have expertise here to help us unpack this because, Norman, I was very upset on Tuesday night to see that we didn't have good messaging. We didn't actually get out and pound the doors. I'm a firm believer in door knocking, even though it's 2023. Touching people on their phones and having, pre-roll ads and YouTube videos. I know that's du jour. It's kind of like the air wars before, where everybody spent the money on them, regardless of the outcome. But I truly believe that when you knock on people's doors and actually talk to them face to face about issues, you can convert them, and those converts become evangelists for the cause themselves. I don't think we did that in Ohio, the RNC, the GOP, and pro life organizations. And I feel like, Norman, there's a huge disconnect. There's Dobbs Day a year ago, a year and a half ago, and the jubilant, it was a celebration. We were so excited about what that was. And now there's the work that's on the ground because the war continues on a state by state basis because evil never sleeps. And so the Democrats have a plan to push abortion bills in places like South Dakota because they were able to win in Ohio and the states before that. They're also pushing those same kinds of pieces of legislation here in the state of Missouri, where I live. We're the first pro life state in the nation. We don't even have any operational Planned Parenthood abortuaries in our state anymore. They moved to Illinois for a more friendly legislative climate. And so, talk to us about what the Democrats are planning on doing here.
Yeah, so South Dakota is in a similar position. Our Planned Parenthood facility, our last one, recently closed. So you'd think it'd be a lot of cause to celebrate, but the left is not giving up and they're pushing hard in a lot of unethical ways here in South Dakota. You saw the Attorney General here in South Dakota recently sent a warning letter to the coalition, basically calling them out on three issues. He said, hey, I have evidence that you guys are lying about what this petition really does. You're encouraging people to sign it twice, and you're leaving petitions unattended for people to sign them. All three of those are violations of South Dakota law, but they will give up at nothing, or they'll stop at nothing to push their radical amendment. And the one they're pushing here is very similar to Ohio. The phraseology is different, but the effect is nearly identical. What it would do here in South Dakota is, first of all, we would have abortion through all 9 months. Second, the parents would be cut out. So if a young girl is being coerced into an abortion, there would be no notification of the parents. And third, in the early stages of pregnancy, there would be absolutely no health or safety standards. Is the procedure happening in a clean clinic? Is it even happening in a clinic? Is the doctor in good standing? Was it even done by a doctor? Nobody's allowed to know. Nobody's allowed to ask. So that's what they're pushing. And we see they've really been completely unethical in the way that they're getting their signatures as well.
So the Democrats, I feel like they have this as a part of their playbook. They promote things that are so ludicrous that when we advocate against them, we sound like tinfoil hat lunatics. Because if you say to a regular person who's a Democrat who lives in the suburbs and has a teenage daughter or son, actually most suburban left-leaning parents think this way, unfortunately, and that is, well, what if my child gets raped? Or what if my child, pops off pregnant by a boyfriend and they're 14 or 15 years old? And they automatically assume, based on the kind of indoctrination that comes out of Hollywood, that number one, their children have to be sexually active. I know for a fact that's not true. Most teenagers don't actually want to be sexually active. They fall into that trap because of peer pressure. And secondly, parents think they have no influence on their children as to whether or not they would make that decision. And they underestimate the power of their relationship with their child and their ability to simply say, I don't think that's good for you. I don't want you to do that. And here's why. And then telling a personal tale of their own experience with premarital sex as a teenager, or telling them about the actual verifiable scientific data that shows that young girls who have relationships in their teen years and become emotionally connected to multiple men have a higher incidence of mental problems, mental health issues, and also substance abuse and self-harm. So when you talk to kids about this in a way that is respectful of their intellect, because kids are so astute, they can really tell if you believe what you're talking about, then your child is much less likely to fall into the peer pressure trap. But instead, we as the GOP and Republicans fall into the trap of basically refuting what the Democrats are trying to do. And I understand about the legislative petitions and them breaking the law there, but that's nothing new for Democrats. They actually specialize in law breaking to get their policy aims achieved because their policies are always bad. So, what
Mhm.
is the plan for South Dakota to actually stop them from having the same success they had in Ohio?
So I think that starts with big picture. It's been said that the quickest way to give up power is to assume that you don't have any. So here in South Dakota, we've already been hitting the ground running. And what we've been seeing, for example, be effective on the street is when these petitioners are telling people, hey, this is what it does, even if it's not an accurate explanation. If there's somebody else there who can say, hey, I've also got more information. Would you like to learn more before you sign? People want to know. So even bringing people more information this early on in the game has already been effective. The Life Defense Fund has been formed here in South Dakota, already hitting the ground running. And I was talking with a national ally just the other day, and they said that they felt like in Ohio, their organization, they didn't have enough time to put together a full strategy. And Ohio was the first time that a bad measure was tried to be passed in a red state. So that's the first time that that was tried. So South Dakota, we can learn from Ohio. We can look at the big picture and say, hey, there's a lot of different ballot measures that have not gone the pro-life way, but Ohio was a very specific fight. And we can learn from Ohio well over a year in advance. And if you look at the numbers as well, Ohio went for Trump by basically 8% over Biden. South Dakota was over 26%. So to say that what happened in Ohio will probably just happen here would be to completely compare apples and oranges. So we're already hitting the ground running, getting volunteers, raising dollars, and getting the message out there of how extreme this really is. You mentioned that sometimes we sound like we have a tinfoil hat on when the left is saying, hey, this is just a reasonable amendment to allow a little bit of abortion when it's necessary. And then we come out and say, no, actually, it's all 9 months and no safety standards for mom in the first trimester. You sound a little bit kooky, but that's what the measure actually would do.
So I love what you just said there about you have a counter narrative buster right there at the petition signing, because I can't tell you how many times when our kids were younger, I would take them to the main library here in St. Louis County, and that's where they always had the petition drives. And the guy is standing there. He looks like someone who might work at Best Buy, right? This is an innocuous looking man. He's on the younger side. He's not dressed up, but he's also not dressed down, so he's repulsive. He's just like anybody you might bump into anywhere. And he says,
Mhm.
"Hey, we want to make sure that workers have rights in Missouri. Would you sign this petition?" And I would literally would get out of the minivan, and as the kids would disembark, I would watch as people would walk up to this man. They're trying to get in the library, and he says, "Do you want to make sure workers have rights?" They're like, "Of course. What do I do? Just put your name, your phone number, and your address." So you put it down, and then they walk in. They're like, keep up the fight, man. They think they're doing something great. Well, the guy is actually there to make sure that workers are forced to be unionized, whether they want to or not. That's not a worker right, being forced into a union as a condition of your employment. But that's what they just signed on to. So I'll never forget. I say no to the guy going in. I don't want to look at it. We're going to the library. We come out and he says, "Hey, you know what, sister?" Just, he's a black guy, and automatically, obviously, his sister. I don't know how that works, but that's what he said to me. And he's like, "You got to sign this." And I ask him some questions about it and start to argue with him about the fact that it's not right. It would have been so much better if there'd been someone there to make that point for me, to make it easier for me to say no. So I love that idea. I want to keep up with you on this and make sure that we get updated information on what's going on in your state. Norman Woods, Executive Director of Family Voice. The website is familyheritagealliance.org. We have about 30 seconds here. Give us anything else we need to know. Really appreciate you, Norman.
I would just say the time is now. It's been said by Bonhoeffer, a famous quote now, that silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. So whether you are a pro-life advocate across the nation or a South Dakota citizen, we need you in the fight right now. Not to do anything is to do something. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil, and the time is now. So follow us at Family Heritage Alliance, or Life Defense Fund is the group that's been excuse me, put together to fight this.
Norman, so great to have you here. I love your fire and energy on this, and especially that you're taking the appropriate tack. We can win, especially in our red states. We have to get these things, stop them from being put on the ballot. Great to have you here tonight. More SNC tonight with me, Stacy Washington, after this.